Today is September the 17th, 2019. My name is Tanya Fincham. I'm with Oklahoma State University, and today I am in the Oklahoma State University Alumni Center to interview Melisa Parkerson, who was the Director of Student Programs for the Alumni Association back in 2015, and currently is the Director of Membership for the Alumni Association.
Yes.
Got that right?
Got that right.
Thank you for letting me talk to you today. And this is going to be part of our O State Stories focused around Homecoming 2015. But before we get there, let's learn a little bit about you, beginning with when and where you were born.
All right. I was born in July of 1975 in Jones, Oklahoma, so around Oklahoma City. It's where I lived my entire life, went 13 years in Jones high schools. My parents, I bled orange from the day I was born. So both my parents attended OSU, and so it was never really even a thought to go anywhere else. This is where I always dreamed of being. So came here after graduation, got my degree in zoology. And then, and so that's kind of how I came to OSU to begin with. And then came back to OSU in 2007, working for the Alumni Association.
Okay, so let's back up there.
Okay.
You finished high school in what year?
So graduated high school in 1993.
93.
And so I was up here starting then, and then left OSU, graduated in 1999.
99. And where did you live on campus?
I actually was a member of a sorority, and so for a couple of years I lived in the house, and then apartments from then on. So I actually never lived in the dorms.
Okay. Did you have a favorite professor while you were here?
I did not. I was one of those that actually tried several different majors while I was here. And so I never really got to know the faculty that well because I just didn't stay in one area that much. And I also think back then it was a little different than it is now, where I never had the same faculty twice. So it only happened a semester of one faculty. It just happened, and then you go on to the next semester. So I never had a chance to really bond with a lot of the faculty during my time.
And how did you land on your major?
I landed, when I was young, I wanted to be a veterinarian. And so I loved animals, still do. And I realized when it was time to start thinking about what major I wanted to go into, I realized that I couldn't hurt the animal to help the animal. So vet was not the future for me. I loved math and science a lot. And so I started with engineering. And then throughout my college career, kind of tried some different things. Kind of engineering was not my thing either. There were some certain classes that just they did not spark an interest to me. And so I realized that may not be where I really had a passion. And so I just tried some different things that I thought that I would enjoy until I got back to kind of animals. And that's where my passion really lived. And so I thought about wildlife management first and realized I was way too social of a person to be probably in a truck on a mountain in a national forest of some sort. And so then decided to go zoology in the thought of possibly working in a zoo or doing research.
Okay.
So
when you graduated, what was your plan at that point?
My plan was I interviewed for a few zoos, found out though that a lot of zoos thought experience outweighed an education. So obviously living in Stillwater, Oklahoma, I didn't have a lot of experience working in a zoo. And so a lot of them gave me the suggestion of going and volunteering for a couple of years and getting some experience. But at the time I was like, I need a job. I need to pay some student loans. I need to kind of fend for myself, and volunteering was not going to get me there. So kind of had to do a redirect of kind of where my focuses were and what I wanted to do. And then so at the time I kind of had some different professions, working like at the Medical Research Foundation. I was very fortunate to find some fellow OSU alumni and enthusiasts who hired me. They were going over to Oklahoma City University, and they knew that my passion was probably at some point getting back up to OSU. So they hired me to work at Oklahoma City University in alumni relations and student affairs. So I did that with them for about 4 years, and then that's what got me kind of back up here.
Hey.
So it kind of came full circle.
So you've definitely been orange a long time.
I have. Yeah.
And did you have brothers and sisters?
I did. I had an elder sister who also came here.
Okay.
And so I kind of followed in her footsteps through the whole thing. And she got her psychology degree from here, and then went and got her forensics degree from Oklahoma, or Central State, or University. Yeah, University of Central Oklahoma is where she got her forensics degree. And now she is over in Tulsa over their forensics department for the city of Tulsa.
And you mentioned both parents graduated from here?
Mm-hmm.
You know what years?
Oh, God. No.
No? Okay. What were their majors?
My dad was general business. My mom got her associate's degree in just general business type stuff. And so she's been assistant her whole career. She was an assistant. And so that's kind of what she did. And then my dad worked for a company for a very long time until they basically restructured. And so he was laid off right when I came to college. And so then he kind of then took some other jobs, do the same kind of stuff, but for some different companies. But yeah, kind of did the same auditing. Insurance auditing is basically what he did his whole career. So.
And did they still live in Jones?
They still live in the same house that I was born in. So they have been there for a very long time. But it's kind of nice, just always knowing that that's house that, I don't know anything different. Same phone number, same address. I don't have to learn anything. It's the same thing.
So when when you moved in, did they bring you and drop you off, or did you bring yourself?
Golly, because I was moving into a sorority house, it was a little different, and my sister was also living in that sorority house. So I don't remember like a big drop off or
tears.
Yeah, no, I don't remember. I was pretty independent too, and so I think when I came up for back then it was called Rush recruitment. I know they brought me up for that, but other than that, my sister was already here, so it was kind of just coming up. It wasn't a big change. And they're only an hour and away, and so I was pretty familiar with Stillwater at the time when I came up, and so it didn't seem like a big change, really.
So you didn't get homesick? No, not much.
Not much. No. Yeah, it was close enough, too, that if I did, I'd just go home, do some laundry, and come back up,
So involvement with sorority, besides that, were you involved in any other activities?
I wasn't. That kind of took a lot of my time, at least my first 2 years. And then I kind of just shifted gears a little bit. Back in the early mid-90s, music was a huge thing in Stillwater, Oklahoma. So live music, you could go anywhere in the town and listen to live music. And a lot of times it was even called the Little Austin, because same kind of music that played in Austin played in Stillwater. So I got really into the music scene of kind of going and listening to live music, local live music, and kind of traveling to Texas to listen to those bands. And so kind of met a group of people that way and kind of focused enjoying that outside of academics. So
I'm thinking that was probably a little bit after Garth.
It was just a little bit. He was kind of the start of it. And then there was the Skinner brothers, who actually one of them played with Garth when he was here as part of his band. And so that same group of people that were here when Garth was here, the Red Dirt Rangers were here, kind of kept that feeding. Bob Childers was here. And so those people kind of kept the music scene going, which is when the whole start of the Red Dirt music scene started. And so that's kind of, during that time, it was just kind of really neat time to be up here. And then we brought so many musicians from Texas up, and they played at the bars and, Warmy Dog and all of that, that it was just a lot of fun to hear live music. They don't have that anymore. It's just not, they don't have that much anymore where you can just go and listen and enjoy. Yeah.
So did you do the football game? Were you into sporting events?
Did all the sporting events. I give the students a hard time because, when I was here, we did the lottery for basketball tickets. Mm-hmm. So you couldn't go, not anybody could get tickets to the basketball games. You had to put your name into the lottery to purchase the tickets. And then you waited for the O'Colly to come out with a list of names of who got the tickets. And then you could only purchase half the season because they split the season into two halves. And then you could go and purchase your half of the season for the basketball. And so I always tell them, I was like, that's how big basketball was when I was here. And, because my years was the Final Four year. And so it was a big time to go to basketball. And I was so fortunate that I got pulled in the lottery every year. And so enjoyed that. And of course, football was always a standard. You go to all the football games. It was never a question if you win or not. It was just what you did. So those are always kind of staples throughout the whole year. So
okay, cool.
Yeah.
And what about homecoming while you were a student?
Well, obviously when I was in a sorority house, it was huge. I will say it is one of my favorite memories of all time is being involved. I had a mentor and a person that was over me in the sorority house who was an artist, and so she did a lot of the design work, and she was always a homecoming director for our sorority, that I basically just attached myself to her and did everything that she needed me to do and helped her whenever she needed me to help her. And it just really kind of embedded a love of homecoming. I didn't, after I was not in the sorority anymore, it kind of did change my involvement, because it's just different. You don't have the opportunity to kind of get to do some of those fun things. But that's why I feel like it was such an iconic thing to sit there and do pumping and meet so many people, late nights, just pumping tissue paper, but talking and listening to music. And but it really is. It's one of my favorite memories during that time. She basically bred that strong passion and connection to homecoming into me.
Do you want to say who she was?
Her name was Diane LaSalle. Unfortunately, she passed last year. And so, but she was such a beacon of light, and she was just an amazing person. And so.
Well, did your house win?
Both years.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, both years we won first place in house tech. So.
Do you want to say what the house was or not? That doesn't matter.
Yeah, I can. It's Chi Omega.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Do you happen to remember the theme?
One year it was I can't remember the exact wording of the themes, but one year it was a Route 66 theme.
Okay.
And so we did like drive-in theater and cars. Back then you could do paper mache too. So we had these big cars and people in them and watching a movie. And it was really, so that was one year. And then the other year, I'm trying to remember. The other year was my first year, my freshman year. And I cannot remember the theme. I remember who we were with, but I can't remember the theme of it. So, yeah.
Did they do a float as well?
Nope.
No float.
At that point, we got to the point where you were just doing one or the other.
Oh, you had to choose.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that was good foundation for what you're.
I think so. I told people I really do think that, when I took my position as director of student programs, it was my dream job. It truly was. To be back and being associated with homecoming and making sure that it happens every year and making sure that we're doing the best we can. And it really was a dream job. And I was so lucky to be able to come back and do it. I can't imagine another position where I would have come back as happy, and so coming into this building and having that feeling of just home, and loving what I do every day and being around those students. I was fortunate to work with some amazing students over 12 years time. And I just couldn't ask for a better job to come back to. So.
And that was when you came back when?
So I came back in 2007. Yeah.
Okay.
So
give those of us who don't know.
Yes.
The rundown on what that job entails.
Okay. So when, so a lot of people don't realize it, that the Alumni Association actually started hosting homecoming in 1920. Officially, the Alumni Association was under the university until 2005, but it still was the parent organization that did everything with homecoming. They worked with the students. Homecoming is a student-ran event. A lot of people don't realize that too. It is completely student-ran by volunteer students, but the Alumni Association has a staff person that's been the advisor of those students. So they kind of make sure that we stay in the rails and keep everything within their little buffers and make sure we don't go too crazy on one side. But the students really are the ones that do all the work and do all the coordination. But the advisor just kind of helps them through all that every year.
And that's a process that takes a month, 2 months?
So it's a full year process. And so immediately after one homecoming, we take 1 week off. We get a week off, and then we start doing elections for the next executive team. So the executive team is usually, they're elected within 3 weeks of the following or previous homecoming. 3 weeks later, the new executive team is selected. They start their transition meetings with the outgoing executive to start learning their new positions, what all they're supposed to be doing. There's 10 executives. And so of those 10, they're each kind of given an area. And so whether it is our campus life executive that does our homecoming tailgate or works with our res halls or student organizations and their involvement into homecoming, or we've got our athletic pride who does our football frenzy event and the homecoming and hoops event in conjunction with athletics. We have our walk around, which most people kind of know about, executive. And then we have a parade executive that manages the parade, the Seaborn's parade that we do. And then we have University Spirit executive who does all of the week-long promotional items, giveaways, just trying to get students excited about homecoming week. And they also do the dyeing of the orange fountain and then those kind of things. We have an executive that does our royalty selection and our VIP coordination. And then we have a promotional. So they're the ones that do like our magazine, our hotel packets. We put something in 2,500 rooms all over Stillwater. There's a little packet the weekend of homecoming. And so our students are the ones that put all that together and kind of get all that coordinated. So it's a lot of work beyond just, a lot of people think about walk around in the parade. Homecoming is actually a week long. And so it starts the weekend before the walk around. We kick it off actually with the rodeo, the Cowboy Stampede. When we're able to make the schedules work, we kick it off with them. And then the student events start that weekend and we go all through the whole week. Harvest Carnival happens on Tuesdays. So that's another executive position. So yeah, so it's a whole thing. And so starting then in January is when the executives come back to do their retreat and pick like the theme for the year and kind of what direction they want to go. And then we go, yeah. We select our steering committee, which is a group of probably about 60 students, 55 to 60 students. They're part of the steering committee. And so they meet starting in the spring. And they're the ones that also help executives get everything planned, get everything coordinated. And then in the fall, we have a big committee where it's a group of about 80 students, mostly freshmen, where they actually help more with the week of. So they'll be at the events, because we need a whole lot more people the actual week of to be in all the places that they need to be. And so that group then comes on to help for the week itself. And hopefully a lot of them will continue on and become steering members and executive members, and they kind of work their way through the system and kind of work their way up.
Well, how are those 80 selected?
It's an application process. Okay. And so they apply as soon as school starts back in the fall. There's an application process. They answer essay questions, and then the executive team goes through and selects them for their different committees and kind of goes through that.
Are any of them independents?
Oh yes, yeah. We try to really promote to the non-Greek community, because we feel like that's where, if there's so much focus put on the Greek community because of walk around, but over the years there has really been a stretch of trying to make it more campus wide. The homecoming truly is a campus wide event. And so that's why we have a whole executive that is dedicated just to the involvement of our res halls and our student organizations. That's all they do, is they work with them, because we have the tailgate on campus right over by Kerr Drummond. And so that's where all of the students that live on campus are invited to come to that tailgate. We have food and games and music and kind of fun things like that. And then they're the ones that help coordinate with them. So we have a strong turnout usually for our sign competition for our student organizations and residence halls. And they're the ones that usually do the parade as well. So most of the things that you see in the parade are from those groups as well.
It's a very time commitment.
It is.
Large time commitment.
It is a huge time. And that's what I think a lot of people don't realize, is how much really goes into homecoming, because you just see it the week of, everything just kind of happens. But it really is a year-long process for the students to kind of be thinking. And same thing with the Greek organizations. They start in the spring. They have to submit all of their designs. They have to submit everything they're going to be doing, get it all approved. They do everything. They get their pairs all starting in March. So really theirs kind of starts almost immediately, it seems like. And so it really is a huge time commitment, but there's such a passion, because I think of the things that's happened before them. They have such a strong commitment of really giving tribute to those before them and keeping the tradition that is so amazing and what OSU is known for alive. There's a lot of universities around the nation that don't have really a homecoming celebration. They have a game, and that's kind of about it. A lot of the big displays and parade floats have gone by the wayside. And so it's a unique thing that OSU has. And, that's why we started a fund to try to raise money to keep it going, because it's a taxing thing. It's not only just time, but money. And so, our goal is to get to the point to where it's not on the students to pay for anything. We wanted to get it to where it's a tradition that is able to be maintained without causing that to affect on anybody else. And so that's kind of the goal, is to kind of get that going and let the students really just focus on their designs and kind of having fun with it.
So I'm assuming there's a a limit on how much they can spend?
There is, yes. Yeah, every event that we have, there's a budget limit of what they're spending. They submit ledgers and receipts and all of that kind of stuff. If they get things donated, which is what we encourage, if they're able to get some things donated, they don't have to claim the full amount of that. So, or if they reuse, so a lot of times the steel that gets put up every year is reused from previous years. They're not having to buy new every year. And so they only have to claim 10% of what that really is valued at, since they didn't have to buy it. And so that's kind of another thing. We really encourage them to try to find alumni who either work in the areas or that will donate it, to try to help bring those costs down a little bit.
I'm thinking they're learning some various skills too, networking.
They are. And that's what we always talk about, the time management alone. You've got to kind of master that. Because is it doable? Yes. But you really have to think about how are you fitting everything in your week that you need to do.
And go to class.
And yeah, I was going to say everything that you need to get done, whether it's class and tests and homework, work. And then you're pumping, and then you're designing, and then you're putting things up. And so you really do have to kind of plan your week out, hour by hour, of how are you going to get everything done. And not only that, but even teamwork and management. And because, there's executives within each of the organizations who then have to manage their peers of what needs to be done and direction of that. Coming together as a collaborative design effort. Engineering, there's so much engineering that is put in because there's so much safety guidelines that you have to follow, and so a lot of the students who are engineers get a lot out of this because it's actual hands-on experience for them. I've heard a lot of students, whether it even be event planners or engineers, that use homecoming as an example in their interviews of things that they've done, that actual hands-on experience. And so it really is, besides just the tradition itself, it's a great learning tool for a lot of the students of kind of how to kind of do some things that they may not get to do in their classroom or in the general setting.
I'm thinking if they've done it once, they may be at one and done.
Well, and that's what, it's interesting because sometimes it all depends. I've seen some that literally have been a lead person every year.
I love it
They love it that much that it is just, and I think there's a competitive nature to them. That they, each year they want to do better and they want to do bigger and they want to do, and so I think there's that also brings them in, especially the engineers, because like I said, I think it's just such a different experience than anything else that they do in their class, that they really do enjoy kind of seeing what they can do and how they can make something move, and the whole design aspect of it, and how to be creative but safe and structurally sound. And so but there are some that kind of like, okay, I've done one thing about the groups, they do a really good job of kind of mentoring younger classmen. So they don't wait until somebody's a junior or senior to get them involved on the leadership side of it, because there's not enough time. So they kind of bring different classifications into the leadership group so they can kind of learn from the previous people kind of how it all works. So it's it's kind of a seamless transition of leadership, because they don't just get thrown into it. They kind of are part of it probably the year before they became a director, so it's kind of a feed. And they're really good about kind of transferring information. They have binders, they have information that they pass down so that it's not just recreating the wheel every year and kind of like, oh, what are we supposed to be doing? They really do kind of help teach the next group kind of the do's and don'ts.
And that secret book.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Like, how did it all work? So
you said they get paired up. They don't get to choose who
they do. They pair up in the February, but they have to basically, there's rules. You can't pair with the same group within 6 years. And so there's a rotation kind of thing where you have to kind of get with different people. And so that's kind of the only rule that really lies with that. And then they kind of natural selection, they have to submit 6 houses in order of their preference of how they would like to pair. And then in looking at the rules, we kind of figure out who kind of fits together. So.
As long as you've been doing this, have there been any failures?
As far as decks or
that just didn't work?
There was one year, I'm not going to name any names. There was one year where we had a very optimistic group, engineering wise, and their thought was that they would have these towers all on a pulley system that rotates. And their thought was there would actually be almost 3 complete different decks. So it's like a triangle. And so every time they would all move, it would be a whole new picture.
Okay.
And then they would rotate. I think the problem is they didn't think about the weight of trying to maneuver all those at the same time. And then once you get one off, the picture is incomplete. So it has to be perfect every time, or it kind of just falls apart. And that's kind of what happened. Not all of them moved like they were supposed to. And then it just never kind of fit back together again. So they finally manually adjusted it to where they would all at least have the same picture. And it stayed that way the rest of walk around. And so that was kind of one of those what was like, idea-wise, it was really cool and it was going to be amazing. But it was a really tough thing to figure out on the engineering side of how to get that to work every time. And
on paper, it looked good.
Yeah.
Practice. Well, they learned something.
They did.
They learned.
And that's the key thing. They kind of learned what works and what doesn't work. So.
Okay, and then in your years that you've been here, have the rules or anything changed?
We've changed a lot within the sizing requirements. Obviously, a concern for ours is always time and money. The students, because there is a competitive side to it, a lot of times that's their main focus is to win, where our main focus is to have a really cool walk around and showcase what the students do and showcase the design and welcome back 80,000 people into this town and just enjoy the weekend. And so the hard part is keeping some things into realistic kind of ideas. And so we've had to change some of the extra materials because over the years, they've kept trying to add more and more metal and cutouts. And well, with that, you have to have a plasma cutter and you have to have bending equipment and you have to, whichever one of those costs us $1 amount. And so that we've kind of put some limitations on to try to keep that down. We've reduced the size quite substantially in the last 12 years. I hope no one really notices because that's kind of the goal is to reduce it, but not make it to where it's really noticeable. And so we've just taken a little bit off here and there every year to kind of get it to where it's not so massive. I think students would be really shocked if they knew how big they were 10 years ago. Because you could pretty much fill the entire yard with the deck. So that's kind of one of some limitations that we've put on. And the number of moving parts we've reduced because once again, it's another time, money, getting those things to move. You have to have motors, you have to have the skill sets, you've got to have design elements to it. Anytime something rotates or moves around, you're now pumping an entire circle and not just a flat surface. So that's more pumping time. So trying to put in some of those kind of restrictions for we're not restricting their creativity and their ideas too much because we want them to have fun with it and we want them to enjoy and be proud of what they do, but kind of trying to help them manage it a little bit.
And then how is a theme chosen each year?
So each year the executive team kind of comes together in a retreat and they basically spend about 2 hours bouncing around ideas. Okay. And it really is just a brainstorming of kind of what words they like, what kind of feeling they're trying to portray. You know, they do keep in mind how the groups, no matter if it's the halls or the Greek groups, how they're going to interpret that and make it their own. Because one of the rules on every single one is one of the scores relates to how did you incorporate the overall theme into your theme, you know, and so they have to think about that. And so they've always been a little bit vague so that 30 groups could come up with a different idea, but still have a reason behind it and what our focus was. So that's kind of how they come about it is think about what they're really trying to do, what words do they like, and what emotion are they trying to kind of pull out, and then within that they kind of create then the direction and what we're trying to make the whole thing feel like.
And what's it for this year?
This year is As the World Turns Orange. And so the thought
soap operas.
Yeah, I know most older people are like, oh, I know that phrase. Young ones didn't really know that as much. When they picked it, they had no idea really where they were going with that. Their thought process was the fact of, you know, our Cowboys and OSU impacts the entire world. And beyond. And so it's one of those things where we've encouraged students to really think about areas and regions and some iconic things and show how the entire world can be represented with OSU. And so this year's going to be really exciting because you're going to go around and see different cities or countries or places. And there's going to be an OSU flair to them. And so it's a little bit different than what we've had in the past. But we're really trying to focus too where it's not just old pictures of OSU. It's really, we wanted to see how we're trying to take it back to the way it used to be for so many years before you could put a picture into a computer software and have it, because I don't know if you know, but basically what the students do now is the chicken wire. It's the small square chicken wire is what they use. They don't use the big octagon chicken wire, or hexagon. And then they basically use a cross stitch software.
Okay.
And so that's why you've been able to see the detail and actually have photos where you can see all the shading, because they take that picture and put it into that software, and then it tells them every single square of what that color needs to be. And they take two different colors and they'll rotate the squares to create a shading element to it. I mean, it's pretty high tech these days. But what that causes, you would sometimes see a lot of the same pictures year after year, because it would get used on one deck one year, and then the next year somebody else would use it. And so before they could do all that, it had to be actually drawn and designed. You know, we sat back there with a grid on the concrete and did masking tape to draw everything out. And then you would pump in the square. That's why everything was pretty two-dimensional in the color schemes, because that's all you had. But you weren't using photos at that point because you couldn't. Everything had to be actually drawn. So nothing really were these pictures of people or pictures of things. It was more creative design. And that's why you would have aliens or Route 66 things, or, you know, you'd have all these really creative. I remember one year, there was a year that they did an Indiana Jones kind of theme. And that was really cool. But so I think over the years it's kind of changed. And so the last couple of years we've tried to kind of go back to that original thought of Homecoming, of having these really cool creative designs. And that's why you maybe don't see the same pictures of OSU things anymore. The theme is much more, let's come up with a theme and then integrate OSU into it instead of the other way around. So
I'm thinking Ricky Fowler was pretty detailed.
Oh yeah, it's crazy how, I mean, it is detailed. Some of them, and especially depending on how good the popping is on it, how amazingly clear it is. It's unbelievable.
So you get to see all of these already. I mean, on paper, you've seen them. And in your mind, do you think, oh, that's the winner?
Oh, every year. I'm never right.
That's the next question.
Never am I right. I think it's all because it's personal opinion, you know, like what you gravitate towards. So on paper, you're like, oh, I love that idea. But it's just, I'm not a judge. And so my opinion really doesn't weigh very much at all. And so, but yeah, I would say very, very seldomly have I ever picked who ended up winning. So I've gotten to where I kind of just give up. I'm just kind of like, oh, I like that one, but it's probably, now I'm afraid to even pick, because maybe I'm jinxing them. Maybe because I've liked the ones, they're not winning. Maybe I should just not say which ones I like. So
do you at least do the walk around?
I do in a very quick fashion. I would say that I haven't really gotten to enjoy one. Because typically I've got maybe 30 minutes that I can run around, just see how things are going. Okay. But because I'm working, my mind probably never really leaves all the other things that are going on. And so, yeah, so it's a little bit different, I think, when you're on this side, because you don't get to really enjoy it as much as all the other people that get to come back for it. So
that Friday and Saturday are not 8 to 5.
Oh, no.
For you.
Yeah. Up until this point, the students come together Friday night after Homecoming and Hoops, which starts at 9. It's usually over about 10:30. The executives come back in and they would tally all the scores, and we would have to get everything ready, have to get the script ready for the next day. So there would be times that we probably are here till 3, 4 in the morning. And then you got to be at the parade 7-ish, depending on what time the parade is that year. But yeah, so there's not a lot of downtime those Friday and Saturday, by that time the students have to be in the parade, and then we have to come back here and do all the parade scores. get those put into the script and get those all finalized, then head over to the game. A lot of times they're sleeping before the game. We're very lucky that the president lets them up in the Gallagher-Iva suite of his for that game. So they're in their suits. So luckily they're not sweating out in the heat the entire time. But yeah, I mean, it's some years you can tell it's been a long 2 days.
And then Sunday you sleep in.
Oh yeah, then Sunday is recoup day. That's all you do is lay around.
That's a long time.
It is. And you have to truly love it.
Most of us don't know that.
Right.
So, no.
You know, and I think we always talk about that's the goal. The goal really is to make everybody enjoy it and love it and not know all the little things that are going behind the scenes that are happening to make sure it all
You
goes
like
on.
to wander through the crowd though and hear comments.
I do love to hear kind of the reactions, and that was another reason why we kind of talked about the themes. I noticed that as people walked around, you couldn't describe a house deck because they were all very similar. You know, it wasn't like you could go around and go, did you see that Indiana Jones one? Or did you see that? You would have to kind of go, oh, did you see that one with Ricky Fowler? Or did you see that one with, you know, you have to name a person maybe. And so that was kind of like, I missed that, where you go around and talk about what it really was, what the design was. You know, I remember one year, one of the groups did a huge Dalmatian that was like sitting, and their whole theme was 101 Dalmatians. And I remember you going around and kind of go, oh man, did you see the Dalmatian one? It was just really interesting to kind of think about how people described them and how they would talk to each other about the ones they really liked. And that's another reason why the executives thought to kind of, let's change it back a little bit to where people did remember a specific deck, you know, and it wasn't about the moving part, and it wasn't about this really cool feature, this one thing. It was really about the overall design and what the whole thing was about and their theme. So
I remember a shark one.
Yep.
And it was cool.
Yeah. There was another one that was they did a really cool, I felt sorry for them because they wanted to do Coca-Cola. But there's a whole pecking order when it comes to what you can do and what you can't do. There's more rules than anybody realizes. So the one that wanted to do Coca-Cola couldn't do Coca-Cola because there was another group that was already using Coca-Cola. So they did Dr. Pepper, and it was so cool. They did a whole semi, and that's what they pumped, was this whole side of the semi Dr. Pepper truck with the front of it all detailed. It was 3D, and it was just so neat. And then everything in it was Dr. Pepper themed, and it was just like, that really stood out to me of, that was a neat deck, you know? It was just something different at that time.
I feel sorry for the ones that work so hard and are so disappointed
I know.
when they don't.
And that's one thing we try to explain too. It's like, don't make it just about winning. Be proud. I mean, you are doing amazing things, and there's never one that I go by and go, oh my God, that's awful. They're all so beautiful, and they're amazing what they're able to do. And I know it doesn't mean the same, but I hope they can go walk away with the pride of what they accomplished and what they put together and what they did as a group, and not compare to everybody else, but be proud of what you did. Because a lot of times the points are so close that everybody won, you know, and like I said, there's a lot of times where it doesn't go the way I thought it should have, you know, and because the one I liked didn't get it. You know, I get it. They like theirs. I like this one. Then none of them could have won, you know. But I hope they leave being proud of what they accomplished, because it is a huge undertaking and it's a huge commitment. And the alumni and the people that come back for it genuinely love coming back, you know. And I hope that's what they can come away to, is that they showed their pride in their university for that weekend more than they could have ever thought they could have. You know, I mean, and they got to show it off to all these families. I don't even know, because I think it's taken for granted a lot now, but I don't know if students realize, you know, 15 years ago, there may have been 25, 30,000 people that come back for walk around. It was nothing like it is now. And so the fact that they are getting, you know, there's some years that I bet close to 100,000 people walk around that area. And that never would have happened, because I think a lot of times back in the day, the community didn't come out for it. it was much more of a alum thing that would come through, much more Greek affiliated, because they would come see their own chapter and what they did. Where now I really do feel like it is a community thing. I'm not saying 100,000 people actually come into this town, but the townspeople will walk through it. People will come into town. You can't get a hotel in a 30-mile radius of Stillwater
For homecoming
weekend. You are looking at probably Tulsa and Oklahoma City, at least for some. So that just shows how many people, and you're right, not all of them go to the game. Not all of them can go to the football game. So this is like their only thing that they do for that weekend. But it really is grown so much. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, it's more than just the walk around.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. And parade, we have close to around 30,000 that go to the parade every morning and fill those streets. And yeah, it's a huge tradition that I hope that we're able to maintain and keep alive, and that the students continue their passion and dedication to it, because it's all up to them. We would not have homecoming without the students.
Do they get to choose the grand marshals for the parade?
They don't. Grand marshal, they can suggest people. And then the selection's actually made by President Hargis and some people like that. So it's a little bit different. And a lot of that's just because a lot of times the students don't know who to suggest. Yeah. We get Garth Brooks a lot as a suggestion, and Ricky Fowler. And so we've had them. They've been grand marshals. So it gets tough to try to find a different person, because they just don't know that many people to recommend. So this year, we're excited. We're having the McKnights as the grand marshals. We thought it was perfect timing, because the opening of the McKnight Center is October, homecoming's in October, and them building that building is going to be such an amazing thing for this town. We thought that was a really good fit for this year, is having them represented in that way. So.
Well, and do they have to go out and find people with convertibles?
They do. They do. Yeah, the students go, and we've got a couple of car clubs that we go to, the Corvette clubs and luckily we have, that's another one of those where I think we've got some drivers and owners of cars that just truly love to do it every year. So we obviously go back to those same people every year and then try to fill where we don't have people anymore. But yeah, that's always a fun chore, is to try to find people with cars. And it's interesting because you have to think about the colors a little bit. We don't want to put President Hargis in a blue one, or crimson red one, or so we are very conscientious about who we put in what color of a car. If the only colors we have are those, we use them. If that's the only things we've got, we just may use them for some different groups and not for President Hargis or things like that. So yeah.
I would think, and that since it's been a couple of years, I guess, since they put in the roundabout. Did that mess up?
It did. We basically now start 2 blocks shorter. So we used to be on the other side of the roundabout where we would filter in everybody and start the parade, and now we start the block after.
Well, that changes the logistics.
It does. It changed it quite a bit. And luckily, we have an amazing relationship with Rob Hill and the emergency management team, because they really help facilitate everything to do with the parade down in the staging area, and getting all those roads blocked off, and having people manning those barricades, getting the right people in, going the right direction, because everybody, depending on your number, you come in at a different point, so that you're facing the right direction and you're on the right side of the street. And I mean, it's a big chore, and we owe Rob a lot because he puts a lot of time and energy, because it never fails. We'll get it all figured out, and then we find out that somebody didn't list their entry correctly and they need 4 times the amount of size that we had them for, and then you have to totally redo the whole thing. And so he dedicates a lot of time to helping us out with that, and it would not run nearly like it does if it wasn't for his support and his effort.
Well, so does the students and his group meet?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So leading up to, the students are responsible to get everything in, and collect all the entries and get all the information that's needed. We also feed all that information over to O-State TV, because they do a live broadcast of the parade on streaming, so they can watch on O-State TV. So we get information to them, we get information to Rob. So we actually come up with a initial lineup kind of what we think it should be. And then send it to him, and then him looking at the descriptions and everything. He might catch something we missed, like having a group of horses in front of a marching band. We don't want that. That's a lot of noise and a lot of poop, people walking. And so he might help kind of restructure some things. And then he comes up with the numbering system and kind of goes with that part. So, and then he helps lead our safety meeting with the entry. So we have a big safety meeting a week or two prior to homecoming weekend, where we go over their number, we go over how do they get into the staging area, we go over the rules. A lot of people aren't happy because you can't throw candy. It's our city ordinance, because there's been too many accidents nationwide of where kids run out for candy and get either hit with a car or stepped on or whatever it may be. So our rule is that you can have people walking along and handing them to the kids. You just can't throw from your entry. So he talks about those kind of rules, safety rules and things like that. So he helps us out with that at meeting as well, making sure everybody understands, because it's his team that would pull people from the parade if something were to happen.
Okay.
So
at that point, it's not just students and university, it's
city too.
City
does amazing help with us. They have a lot of volunteer workers that spend a lot of volunteer hours with us. Rob and David Casey come to every single one of our steering meetings in the fall. We meet weekly. It's at 8 o'clock at night. And so they come to those meetings just literally to be there in case there's a question. Sometimes there's no questions. Sometimes there might be one. But they're really just there to be there, to help if they need help. Then when it comes to walk around, it's their volunteers that man every barricade around this whole place. Same thing with parade. It's the city's teams. Whether it is police or volunteers, it doesn't matter. They're the ones that are manning those barricades. So yeah, I mean, homecoming would not happen without the city's involvement.
Okay. So on a homecoming day, parade day, what would you be doing?
So depending on what my area was at the time, we have the one advisor is always down at the actual staging area, basically attached to Rob's side, just to make sure that everything's going out in order that it's supposed to be going out to. They're also the person that is radioing in to the TV team if anybody's out of order, if somebody didn't show, because they have a lineup that they're going to be reading from, and you don't want them talking about something that's not there. So they're trying to communicate to the judges and to the TV team if anybody's out of order, or if somebody didn't show, they're doing that. And so that person's just there, just helping along the way. If anything's changing, anything, just to be in the loop on everything. And then we usually have somebody down at our judging area, our VIP area, which is down at the Board of Education building. That's where all the judges, the band judges, and the float and entry judges are. So that's kind of where they're at. And so we usually have a person there. And so the last couple of years, I've had a co-advisor that has been down at the staging area, and then I've been at the VIP area.
Okay, so you're busy that day too.
Yes.
Okay, then let's bring us into 2015.
Okay.
On that day, take us through your day that day.
Okay, and so the day started out just like a normal day. It was a normal parade day. At that time, I did have a co-advisor. It was her first year of being the direct advisor of the students. And so she was down at the staging area, and I was at the VIP. And so the parade's going through. Everything's going great. Actually, the end of the parade goes through, and we are quick to get back into our vehicles. Basically, we have to hurry up and get out with the score sheets and to get everybody out before the traffic kind of opens back up. And so we're out of there pretty quick. We pick up everybody and are on our way back here to this building as soon as that fire truck at the very end passes us. And so we get back here, and I was told that there were fire trucks and an ambulance. We could hear them. Even got to the point. So at one time, I feel very sorry for this person. I never heard what all happened, but I believe somebody had a heart attack over not far from where the bank or Simmons Bank is now, but it was SMB Bank then. And so I heard all this, and so my thought was, oh my gosh, okay, so that must have been it. So I call Rob to find out what's going on. I hear sirens. and he informs me that somebody had driven into the crowd. And at the time, I thought he was kidding. Like, I was like, oh, you're kidding. And he's like, no, Melissa, seriously. He goes, I think there's fatalities. And I'm just in shock at this point. So he's like, I gotta go. Because he obviously was at the start of the parade, trying to get to the end of the parade, where all this occurred. And so our first thing is, okay, we've got all of our executive team here. So all the students are here. I'm trying to get my leadership together to tell them what has just happened. So a lot of it was coordination of just trying to figure out the best way to kind of let everybody know what's going on, without a lot of details. Because at the time, all I knew is that someone drove into the crowd. I had no idea the magnitude. I had no idea of numbers or even really where. I knew it obviously was towards the end because nothing happened up until where we were. And so we talked to the students. I did find out, it was interesting too, because we also had Gina Noble, who was our Grand Marshal that year, but she was also the city mayor. She came back to the building. So she was up here. We started calls to try to figure out what all's going on. And so we kind of had a command post up here to figure out what all's going on, what all do we need to communicate, what's, just trying to figure out our next moves. The students were in one of our conference rooms where we normally go to start doing scores. So I informed them of what happened. Our chairman of the board at the time came in. Oh, let me backstep, actually. I was downstairs trying to get our president here at the time, Chris Batchelder, our vice president, Jace Dawson, and then our chairman of the board, Phil Kennedy, was all kind of around, and I was trying to get them together to tell them what happened. So I kind of pulled them in, got them all arranged, and got them focused enough, because you don't realize what the magnitude of what I'm trying to talk about. And I told them what happened. Phil was very supportive in the sense of we prayed. He led us in prayer to try to figure out, okay, well, that's kind of a collection of get our thoughts together, and let's pray for those that are going through all this down at the line. And then I came up, told the students. We kind of, it's one of those shocking moments that occurs that you don't really know how you're going to handle it. So you just kind of take it all in. And we made the students stay here. Our thought was, we don't want you going out. I know you want to be with your parents. I know that you want to kind of do some things, but right now we need you to stay here, because people are going to start asking you a bunch of questions. You're going to get bombarded with things. Just stay here. This is kind of a safe space at this point, until we kind of really know what's going on. At this point, we also realized that one of our executives' parents were down on the corner. So panic starts setting in at that as well. He can't get a hold of them. They're not answering their phones. So now we're dealing with this as well, of the unknown. So there's an emotional side going on with that, as well as us just trying to find out pieces of information as they're filtering through. So really, we were here waiting to hear kind of what goes on. Luckily, our student finally got a hold of his parents. They luckily had left right after they had gone through. After they saw their son go through the parade, they kind of like, let's go for a walk. And so they went and got changed at the hotel and went walking around Boomer. Didn't have their phone on, and, didn't think anything of it, because they knew he was going to be busy for hours. They weren't going to get to see him. So, but at least there was this relief of that, knowing that they weren't on that corner. But yeah, and so it was a surreal day. We had the kids pretty much stay here till about an hour before game time. And then we said, okay, go be with your families. Try to not talk about what all's going on, because you don't know everything. Just go see your families, go hug your parents, and be happy that you're here and that you're safe, and we'll kind of move forward. And so we did that, and then we were up in the suite together, and it was just a very somber summer day. It just, I'm going to get emotional, but
That's okay.
that's about it. I mean, that was kind of the end of the day.
Did someone in the suite have anything to say to the group?
I think most of them were pretty respectful about kind of not talking about it.
Yeah.
You know, there were a few people that just kind of gave them a good job, you know,
Right.
but that was about, it was just really quiet. And most of them, we kind of stayed actually so up in the Gallagher suite, there's a big open area that people can sit and watch the game, or you can sit in the actual suite areas that look actually over Gallagher. A lot of them stayed in the room. Just
It's hard to watch the game.
it is.
Get into the game.
It is.
Day too.
So
How about the person that was responsible, in charge of, not responsible,
Yeah.
in charge of?
in charge of everything. I mean, she took it in stride. Thank you. I will say, obviously, to work so hard for something and spend a whole year wanting to make the best parade ever. You know, you're constantly thinking about the people before you and going, okay, what can I make better? You know, and so she had a whole year of working this and focusing on it and really putting her whole heart and soul. And then for this to happen, it just put such a negative vibe to such a wonderful thing. You know, and I would say for a while, we had a hard time of trying to separate the two. You know, and our minds were like, it's not a homecoming accident. It's not a homecoming incident. It's not a homecoming tragedy. It's not homecoming's fault
Right, it wasn't.
that this happened. It could have happened at any parade, you know. I mean, it really could have happened anywhere. And so for her, we kept trying to separate it, you know, that it wasn't a homecoming issue. It was a crazy person driving into a crowd of people, to try to make her not lose sight of what all she accomplished and what all she did. And so that was kind of our thought. Don't know if it's the right thought. I don't know if it's the correct thought, but our mind was, let's separate. Let's draw a line and be like, crazy thing happened, horrible tragedy, but then homecoming was still great. Homecoming was everything you put into it. It was wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how we were able to process it all, is to try to really differentiate between the two. And so, but I know that sorry, I'm getting emotional again.
It's okay.
But I know it really affected her. They did a big vigil on campus for it.
I remember that, yes.
And so, you know, we went as an executive team to that. And it's just, it really did bond the group a little differently, because they had to deal with something so different and so rare. But yeah. And then I do know that she did come back when we did the monument and stuff on the corner, the Forever Strong dedication.
In 2018.
Yeah.
2018.
I think it was last year. Yeah. She came back for that and was present for that. And so did another one of two of other executives were able to come back for that and kind of went. And so it's obviously, it will always be part of them. But
Well, there wasn't a single thing they could have done differently to have prevented it.
there was nothing, you know, and that's one thing I think we even tried to, because obviously with David Casey and Rob Hill, we've talked to them several times, you know, through the whole process. And it's hard not to have a personal feeling, even though you had nothing to do with it. And that was the one thing that, you know, there was a lot of meetings and overview of kind of the processes and, you know, afterwards of it, are there things that we should be doing differently on the safety reasons? You know, Rob did a lot to try to, what do we need to change so this never happens again, you know? And I think even them, when the people came back and go, you're kind of doing everything you're supposed to be doing. I mean, you had your barricade up. You had another motor vehicle in the way. You had, there's the little things that you could have to add, safety to it, which now he's done everything he possibly could do. Besides like putting up concrete walls that just block the entire road. But yeah, I mean, and so at least knowing that you've done what you could have, and sometimes there's just those things you can't stop from happening, unfortunately. And so that was just one of those times.
Well, when the group transitions to the next year's group, did she have any, how did you work that out?
I think she was able to focus on what her job was and making a great parade. And
that's good.
And that's kind of, that's what the goal is to make a great parade. And like you said, there's nothing you can do to perceive, to predict what's going to happen or anything. You just do the best you can to make sure what you're doing is going to make it great. And so, and I don't know, it was really interesting too, because I'm sure you heard the story about the kid who was Pistol Pete that year. Taylor, he was actually the executive director for Homecoming the year before, before he became Pete. And so it was just kind of another surreal moment of these kids who worked so hard to put on Homecoming being directly affected by that. Who would have ever thought that he'd be at the end of the parade, hanging out when everything happened, and then transports a kid to the hospital and in his truck, and to still have that tie to Homecoming person that knows everything that goes in to Homecoming because he just did it years before, and so for him to be part of it again, and it was an interesting kind of weird circle of people that it affected in a weird way. So.
Yeah, and instincts kick in, and
yeah, and thank goodness he was down there, and was able to get the kid to the hospital, and but yeah, it was just different. So
yeah, and Rod had explained that when it happened, where it happened, if it was going to happen, that was as good a place as any, I guess, for lack of a better way of saying it.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of ways of getting in and out of that area, being the large intersection. The fact that they were able to get choppers in there. I mean, if they would have happened anywhere else along the way, you couldn't have had that access points and getting people in and out quickly. But yeah.
Well, did that impact the order for the planning for the next year?
Not really. Not really. The next year, our grand marshals were our first responders. We wanted to kind of highlight them and give them credit for the amazing job they did. And so that kind of was interesting though too, because not everybody can be because they have to work. They're all actually working the parade, and so they couldn't actually be in the parade. So they each area kind of selected 1 to 2 people to be the representative that would ride in the parade. And so that was kind of interesting for us to kind of figure out, how do you highlight this ginormous group of people that had a part in this, but only make them this big. You just don't have that much space, more manpower to let all of them be part of it. But really, other than that, the parade lineup, it's the way it is. Because it could have happened at the first of the parade just as easy as it could have happened at the end of the parade.
That's true. Does the parade always end with the fire truck?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah. Emergency vehicles always kick us off. We have the motor cord that the motorcycles are the first, and then we have the fire trucks at the end. So,
and the decision to do the riderless horses.
There was a gentleman who had offered his horse to do that, and of course we quickly said that would be amazing to do. Anybody, I think, that has grown up in rural Oklahoma, or probably rural anywhere, has been part of parades where that is a signifying thing. And so we worked with them, and we worked with another company to get the boots donated to put in there, and And that was kind of our way of trying to give tribute to those that we lost. But yeah, so it was definitely something that we didn't even think twice about. That yes, that's a perfect way to kind of to do this. So
honor.
Yeah.
And were you involved at all with the memorials part, the site?
I was not. Yeah, no, that was all pretty much finalized through the foundation and through them.
In the city, so the
Right.
university wouldn't necessarily anything.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, and then so you had mentioned 1920 was when this all started.
Right. Yep. We are celebrating our centennial homecoming next year. So we're at 99 this year. So we're trying to get things geared up for next year. It's probably going to be a very different year. And we're trying to figure out the parade because we're going to try to have a whole lot of historical pieces in that and bring a lot of people back that maybe haven't been back in a long time. But there is 100 years worth of celebration that we need to cram into that weekend. But yeah, so it's an exciting time. You know, we're not losing sight of this year's homecoming because first we got to get this one going and happening, but there is focus kind of looking at what all we are going to do next year and get everything planned and prep for that. So we're hoping everyone comes back to help us celebrate. But yeah, it should be a pretty big celebration. So we're excited about it.
Do you expect the parade to be longer?
We're trying to figure out what we want to do with the parade. The parade, Rob will shoot me, so hopefully he never sees this. I don't know how we're going to get away with it not being longer.
The route itself can't
change.
Can't change.
And the problem is our staging area is pretty maxed out. We would have to close off some more blocks to add to make the parade any longer. So we're playing with the ideas. There's two different ways of that. Of, you know, do we do a year of all homecoming related OSU entries only, where it is really all about the centennial homecoming piece, or do we do all of that and still let community have entries? So yeah, because it could become a very, very long, because that's the other thing too, is how long do people really want to sit out there on a parade too? So the longer you make it, the longer time it goes. And so we have to be cognizant of that as well, of, you know, 140 is a long parade already. So I don't know if we really want to go bigger than that. I don't know. So those are the things we're trying to figure out right now, is kind of what is the makeup of that. And if we get all of the entries for the historical purposes with homecoming, whether it be, you know, because we've talked about getting all of the homecoming queens back and trying to get all of the homecoming kings back and all of the former homecoming executives back, and, you know, trying to think about by hall, if you could get alumni back for your hall that were your coordinators of your homecoming. And so when you start thinking about all of these entries with all of these people, how many spots do we have open still for general public who want to celebrate the centennial, who have been probably part of the parade for 30 years? And, you know, so there's still that tie that they've been doing it for so long. There's as much as a tradition as an OSU entity is. So there's a lot of discussion about how do we make all this work. And it could be the fact of we double up. You know, if they're not huge entries, we make cars go side by side so that it doesn't make them really long. So I don't know. There's a lot of those that we're under discussion right now of trying to figure out for next year. How do we do all this? How do we really make it all great? I know, yeah. Like, put your name in. If you get drawn, you get drawn. If you don't, sorry, I don't know. But yeah, because I get it. Everybody wants to be part of it, and everybody wants to celebrate. And
so, how long does 140 entries take?
From start to from the first person, when the first person crosses to the end, it's about an hour. So the whole parade itself usually lasts about an hour and a half.
So stretch it to 2 hours?
Probably,
yeah.
Which for some it's like, that's a long parade sitting there. But I don't know. Maybe people, because it'll all be different and all fun and it's worth it. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
You have some entertainment along the way.
Well, and that's the thing is, you know, if we are able to get some different bands, I don't know, music, and I don't know. it's, and parades are tough too, just because I don't feel like we've talked about the fact of bands are harder and harder to get to come. What I've been told is that parade marching is not as popular as field marching routines. And so a lot of schools don't even practice it. They don't even participate in parades. They don't do it. They do everything with field routines. So that's kind of affected some things with our bands, because everybody's like, where's more high school bands? We would love to have so many. We would love to have 10, 15. We would love to have more. But we just don't. I think students, don't have the funding to get them here. You have to pay for a bus and pay for them to get here. And so I don't know if that's inhibiting them or just timing. A lot of times we fall on fall break. So that can affect it. But then also just they don't do a lot of parade marching. So they're not practicing. That's not what they practice. That's not what they do. And that could be affecting it too.
It seems like it would be easy to do, though. You
just march. Well, my whole thing is like, don't compete. No, if you don't want to compete, just come and play.
Yeah.
You don't have to compete in the competition. Just come and march and play and enjoy. And so, but yeah, so that's kind of another thing that we've always struggled with, of trying to figure out how to get more students or more schools involved in a way. But yeah, I think it's just one of those things that's reflecting nationwide with the arts and the money that can go to arts. And, that's probably the first hill to go up, is just getting more funding for them, so that they probably could go more places. And because they may only be able to go one place or something. That might be the other restrictive, like, well, we have a competition that we already go to, and that's where we fill in our money to. And so we just can't get them here.
You'll have to talk Jones into coming.
I know. Why aren't they here? They should be here. So.
Well, at least Stillwater's would come, or not.
So, for the longest time, Stillwater did the concession stands.
Oh.
And so they always had to be at the stadium before the parade was done. And so some years they've been able, but I think last year they weren't doing the concession, so they were able to do it last year. So they've done it a couple of times, but not all the time. And I think it's just, and the fact that sometimes we don't know game time until like the week before, that really affects some people too, because they can't plan, neither can we understand. But yeah, that kind of can throw a wrench into it too. And we've had to move people in the parade route too, because if the game is an 11 o'clock game and we have an 8 o'clock parade, there's not a lot of in between. And so sometimes we may have to move people up to the first half of the parade, because they have to be somewhere in the stadium so far before the kickoff and things like that. So game time can affect some things last minute. So a lot of times we kind of go, okay, if there's people that we think are going to have to be out, let's just go ahead and put them towards the first. Mm-hmm. That way, then no matter what time the game is, we don't have to move them. So there's definitely some learning things that we've figured out over the years to try to help navigate those last minute changes and kind of minimize what all we have to change. But
it would be nice if they could dictate the starting time for next year at least.
Oh my goch, it'd be awesome if they could let us know. I think out of the 12 years that I've been here, I think almost half of them have been 11 o'clock games. Mm-hmm. And I would say probably at least half of them have been the 6-day ruling, which means we don't find out until the week of. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, seriously, can we not just, why can't it be any of these other games that we find out 2 weeks before? We know exactly what time our games are. No, homecoming is always one of those that ends up just not being the most ideal situation. We've had an 8 o'clock p.m. game. Not very many of our homecoming games have been, like, I think all of us talk about the ideal time for a homecoming game for the students and everybody is like that 2:30 spot. Because that way we have time to do the parade, we have time to come back, get everything ready, they have a chance to kind of relax for a minute before we have to go over to the stadium. Then we get over there, they have time to eat, they have time to relax for a moment. It's just, that's the ideal time. If it's earlier than that, it's like mass chaos, rush constantly. And if it's later than that, then there's this huge gap, because the parade does not go later. The parade is always either 8 o'clock if it's an 11 o'clock game, or 9 o'clock if it is any other time besides 11 o'clock. So yeah, if you have a 6:30 game, we have a huge gap in between and the students are tired. They're coming off of maybe 3 hours sleep for the 2 nights before, for a whole week of not a whole lot of sleep. And so sometimes we have air mattresses here. And so for the week of homecoming, we'll have those available. So if they want to air up the air mattress and take a quick nap, they can.
Do many of them do that?
Sometimes, yeah. Especially for those late nights, because they've got to be back up. So all night, pomp night, Thursday night, our walk-around executive and our executive director, and then usually a couple of others, they're up through the whole night. As long as there's construction going on, they will do walk-arounds, and they'll make sure everything's going okay, make sure that the people are not stressing out, just kind of being there, supporting them in any way they can. So they don't want to go home because they're afraid if they go home, they won't wake up. So a lot of times it's easier for them just to come here, crash for 45 minutes, set an alarm, and then get back up, go back out, and then come back and crash for a little bit. And the same thing, for that Friday night, depending on what time we finish with scores and that kind of thing, sometimes they'll stay here just because it's easier than once you get into your bed, it's like you may not wake up as like you think you're going to because you're all comfy and those kind of things. But yeah, so sometimes they'll sleep here, and especially depending on what time that game is. If it's a late game, there's a good chance that there's some napping going on in between.
And do you keep refreshments or nourishment?
Oh, yes.
Whatever.
Basically, almost the whole week of homecoming, our staff is amazing, and they bring food up. We'll have crock pots of stuff. We'll have Chick-fil-A trays and fruit, and so we bring food for them, especially kind of Wednesday on when we know there's going to be late nights going on. So yeah, there's always food in the break room for them, just to kind of whatever they feel like eating. There's food in there.
It's a lot of details, and it comes together.
It does. Somehow it all comes together at the end.
And we pray for no rain.
Exactly. Pray for no rain, especially, and everybody's like, well, if you could have rain, when would you want it? And I was like, not Wednesday through Friday. If it rains on the game day, I'm fine with that. People sit in the rain of the game, they can put ponchos on, it's fine. But when the students are trying to, this is another one of those, like, people don't realize everything goes into it, but if there's lightning, they can't be up on the lifts. And so Rob talks very closely with our walk-around executive, and anytime that there is lightning within so many miles from Stillwater, he calls our executive and says they have to be down. So then we send a group text to all of the house directors saying off the lifts. Well, then that puts them at a holding pattern until there's no more lightning around. And then Rob can say, okay, they can get back up. So if there's any kind of weather, it really can delay them hanging those screens and getting everything up before walk around. There was one year we did delay kind of when judging happened and when they had to have everything done and everything because of rain. They just couldn't get it all. They had to be up and down so much that they couldn't get everything hung in time. So yeah, people don't realize all the stuff that goes into that. But yeah, you can't, for safety reasons, you can't have them up. And so we manage all of that, and we make sure that nobody's unsafe and that they're following the rules with that. And our fire protection students go around through the whole time and make sure that they're minding their safety regulations, make sure there's not open holes, or make sure that there's not something too close, make sure they have a fire extinguisher nearby, following all the safety rules that way. So it's a great learning experience for them to kind of see firsthand our safety regulations, if people are following them, how do we enforce these, and keep people safe. So.
Well, then I'm curious about the cleanup the next, next day. Or
so we provide dumpsters to all the houses. Try to tell them to manage it in some way so that they don't fill it up and then there's stuff everywhere because they overfilled it, and because they can't pull it off if they can't pull that tarp over it and all this kind of stuff. So there's rules that go with that as well. But so they just have to have everything cleared away by the Sunday after. So they have a whole week basically to clean up. Some of the groups will tear down in a day, especially if they didn't win or they didn't do anything. They'll tear down their stuff really fast. But yeah, so they have a full week to kind of tear everything down. Unfortunately, like I talked about, the steel and the metal and the motors and pulley systems, all that kind of stuff is reusable. So most of the time that all gets stored away, put away. Typically the only things that really get thrown away is the wire and the tissue paper. And maybe sometimes wood, if it was some of those extra materials that maybe were there to support, maybe it being PVC pipe or something like that, that maybe had too many holes or shape that didn't work. But for most part, a lot of it's just the chicken wire and the tissue paper. And unfortunately, people talk about recycling and things like that. I don't know how you can recycle it. It has glue all over it, and it has paper, so it's two different materials. We have not figured out a way that you can recycle that. Just because, like I said, it's got glue and everything else on it. So I think for recycling purposes, you'd have to tear off all the paper, run it through something to get the gluey gunk off, and then recycle the wire separately because of metal. So yeah, that's one thing that we're still trying to figure out if there's a way in the future to kind of help with that. One thing we are looking at is we had the engineering students over last year, I think as a senior project, they were looking at different materials for the pipe. Because right now the students have to weld. It's dangerous. Not all of the groups have somebody who has experience welding, so sometimes they're learning as they're out there. And so safety-wise, it's not an ideal situation for some. Some of them have kids that have welded their whole entire life, but not everybody has that. And so the engineering group found some structures where it's almost like, I don't know, like pixie sticks. I don't know. It's like where you...
Like Lincoln Logs.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember those little sticks that had the wheel and you stick the little things in it. But yeah, you would just reuse these. Like you would send off your diagram, the pieces would be pre-cut, and then you would just screw them in. No welding is needed. It just clips in together everywhere. And it's a strong enough structure that can hold the weight. So we're looking at the possibility of transitioning in the next couple of years to this possible other material, which I think would also help with time and money, and because now you're just clicking things together and no one's having to weld, and so it's an interesting idea. And so we're kind of looking at that. Probably won't launch it next year. We want to really make sure we go through the whole process of how does this all work, because obviously right now they all have steel poles that can be reused, so there's a huge cost involved to transition to all new material. And we don't want to put that on the students to incur that cost. So we're trying to figure out how do you transition everybody if they want. They don't have to, but if they would want to go to this new material, how do we do this? And so it's probably in the next year or two process that we're looking at doing it. But that's another thing that we've kind of tried to figure out another way, a safer way that we can make homecoming survive.
But those wouldn't necessarily be reusable.
No, they would be. Yep, they're all reusable. Yep. And so the only thing is, what if you want to change your layout? Yeah. And that's what we've talked about, is every year they change their configuration. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know how they would, and that's what the students that were doing this, they're like, well, yeah, they kind of have to stick with the same structure. Yeah. And I was like, well, I mean, that's great in theory. I just don't know if the students would want to do that. Because they even talked about what they could do is have permanent holes in the ground that they would just reuse every year. So that way they wouldn't be digging a new hole, putting a new concrete in. It would literally just be, take the plate off, drop your poles in. But yeah, you'd have to kind of figure all that. So that's why I say this is not a quick little, let's just do this next year kind of thing. It's going to be a process of figuring out how to do all of that and really talk to the students to find out how do they want to do that. Because there's no point in doing stuff 1 year and then the next year they come in and go, I don't like that we have to do it that way. And I'm not going to use those. I'm going to go back to the poles because I can make them however I want. And so there's going to be a lot of discussion to kind of see the best avenue of how to move that forward if we move forward.
Do a pilot study and let one volunteer.
That's kind of what we talked about, is like if there is a group that really wants to spearhead it, and show everybody how it looks and how it works. And, that might be how we have to do it, is start with one. And then if the others want to follow suit, they can. But we talked about the fact that financially, if we're going to pay, like if we end up using the endowment money and paying for all this, well, then you don't get to go back. Either you make the transition or you don't. But yeah, because we don't want to spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, and then it just goes to junk, and it doesn't get reused, and it doesn't get to.
Oh, where do they store all that? I mean, I'm assuming each place stores their own.
They do, yeah. And so most of the houses actually have their stuff along the side of their house. Mm-hmm. You just don't notice it.
Okay.
So most of them have a spot where they've got little racks and stuff, and they just lay all their pipe down there, and that's where it is. And then some of them, I think, have offsite, like an alumni's land, or, so it just kind of depends. But I would say most of them store everything next to their house.
It's just mind-boggling. Those who've never done it.
I know, it really is. Well, and that's like, even for me, it's funny because, yes, I was part of it when I was a student. But even then, if you're not a director, or you're not even part on this side of the executive team or steering, all you see is this little piece. You don't even really understand all the inner workings behind everything. You just know that you're participating in this and we're creating this, and you don't really understand all the other stuff. And so it was enlightening even for me, thinking that I knew exactly how homecoming worked, to come in and go, oh my gosh, there's so much more to it that you don't even realize there were students that were handling all of that. Because you see all the visual things, but you don't think about the behind the scenes stuff.
So when you took this job, did you have someone that kind of took you in? Or did you
kind of
learn as you go? I guess?
Yeah, Ann Scott was the person who was in my position before me. And she took a position down in Texas. And so she was nice enough to let me kind of pick her brain. I went down and met with her and kind of just asked her a whole lot of questions, because obviously homecoming was not my only job. So I also was over our student alumni board. I was over our student awards group, our legacy. No, at that time I wasn't over legacy program yet. I was over Grand Prairie University. And so there was other areas. And so I really kind of went down just to kind of find out about everything. The other thing is Larry Shell was our vice president at the time when I came in, and he helped me kind of navigate who I need to go meet with and kind of familiarize myself with, and could ask them questions about things. And so he really mentored me of kind of what direction, but a lot of it also was just reading. Back then, Ann was amazing at files and action plans, and so I did a lot of just reading what all she did and when she did it, and kind of fed that into my processes. And then another funny little thing is that, so Amanda Harrison, Amanda Moore back then, she was my executive director my first year. So I came in right after she was elected. And so we had the whole year together as her as executive director of homecoming. And so it was her final senior year and me as my first year. And so we learned a lot from each other. I really relied on her because she had been through as an executive the year before, to kind of help me navigate some things. And then she learned from me just to kind of, because nothing was status quo. I mean, we could do anything. We could change anything because I hadn't done it before. So if there's a better way of doing it, I wasn't tied to any particular thing. So it was a great kind of combination. And so her and I had a great first year together. And what's interesting is that she ended up coming back to work for me 4 years ago as the advisor for homecoming. And so when we added our coordinator positions, who kind of then became the advisor, I stepped as a co-advisor role, and she took on the lead role. I asked her to come back and serve in that capacity. And so she came back and was the advisor for homecoming for 2.5 years, I guess. And now she runs our building. She's the director of our alumni center, and manages all the events that happen in our building. And so it kind of was a full circle. She had went away and worked for a hotel in New Mexico for a while. Her degree was in event planning and hospitality. And so she did that for a while, and then came back and worked at the foundation for a couple of years doing their event planning. and then came back to homecoming. And so she always talks about kind of the full circle of doing homecoming as a student and then coming back and being part of the advising world and being part of it in a different way. But she's one of those that always did. She talked about homecoming and being the executive director and executive when she went on job interviews because she was not Greek. And so for her to talk about what all it meant to plan homecoming, people really, in her interviews, they were shocked at what all she had to coordinate and manage. And she managed a team of her peers and worked with outside the city and the campus and kind of all the different facets that she had to work with. And they were impressed by the magnitude of everything that she had to do as a student.
On the job training.
Yeah.
To the top. Yeah.
Yeah, and not even getting paid for it. Doing it for free. So it's kind of neat to have those students kind of come back around and still be part of it in some way.
Yeah, I mean, they were lucky to get you to come back.
Well, I was happy. It's been a kind of a bittersweet year with me transitioning to a new position here because everybody's talked about the fact, I thought it was like your dream job and I thought you loved it. And I did. I just think after 12 years, I was just ready for something a little different. It's hard to get out of the practice of constantly thinking about what they're doing. So I'm looking forward to maybe changing that direction of my mind where I'm not thinking about what are the students doing right now kind of thing. I can actually be thinking about some different things. So I'm going to miss it. It's been kind of a bittersweet moment, but I'm excited for the future and the changes. And I'm excited to see where the new people take the students and kind of what new changes they've got in mind and kind of the growth that they're going to do and those kind of things.
So you'll get to be in the parade as a former director.
I don't know how they're going to do that. Yeah, I'll probably have to work somewhere else.
You'll at least get to do the walk around in your own sweet time.
Well, this year I'm actually still doing the judges part of it because it's a transition year. I'm still kind of involved this year. And actually after this year, then I'll be we have a hub where we set up and we hand out koozies and ribbons and buttons and all that kind of stuff, and I'll be in charge of that after this. So still probably won't get a whole lot of downtime, but at least I won't be doing scores at 4 a.m. That's one thing I won't have to be worried about. So
that's good though. Oh, maybe you'll come back around to it.
That's true. Who knows?
You never know.
Who knows? Yeah, I could end up coming back. I miss it so much. So.
Well, we've covered a lot. Is there anything you can think of that we need to?
I can't think of anything. I feel like I've rambled and talked a lot. So
no, it's been great.
I can't think of anything.
Oh, my last question then will be, how do you want people to remember Melisa Parkerson?
Oh, God. I don't know. I've never thought about me. I hope people remember me as somebody who really thought about what was best for our students, and upholding the traditions that so many of alumni have spent countless hours towards. So those two things I think of upholding that tradition and the well-being of our students kind of combined. With hopefully what people will think of me of maintaining and kind of continuing that thought.
Well, it seems like to me you're always bubbly.
I am.
So they'll remember you for that too.
I hope that's something. I do try to bring a little bit of fun. People sometimes call me a little cheesy. But I think that's fun. I think that's what kind of brings it in. And I've always said, I think to work with college students the way that you do, you kind of have to be a little bit on the quirky side and the fun side because they bring more energy. I'm not young anymore. But it's amazing the kind of life they bring and the passion and excitement, and it just makes you feel young forever if you're around that, and that's one thing I've enjoyed is through this whole process, I kept getting older, but I didn't feel it. I just kept feeling like, I came in my early 30s and left at I'll say mid or almost mid 40s. And it was just a fun ride. And it's funny because I thought I was old when I came in. And now I realize, no, I was not. I was not old when I came in. I was like the cool aunt. Now I'm kind of like I'm getting closer to that mom feel or I'm not grandma yet. I'm not going that far, but you know, when you start getting to the mom feel, it's a little different. You treat kids differently. That's what I started noticing, even too, the change of how I thought of things, because these students now were 20 years younger than me instead of 10 years younger than me. And when they start becoming old enough to be your kids, you start thinking of them as, you know, you want to protect them and so that's kind of been a change. Where before I kind of felt like I was a little bit more on their level, and I'm not on their level anymore. They think very differently than I do. I feel like now what I thought would be something they would enjoy or like or is not the case. You know, I'm that far removed from like, yeah, I say things now, they're like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Like the
mom.
Like the homecoming mom.
Yeah. The girl that is the current advisor now, she's in her mid-20s, mid to late. And she had no idea what I was talking about. I was like, you didn't do mums in high school? And she's like, no. You know, and so I'm like, oh, I'm starting to get to that point, you know, because I was like, I remember they still did mums when I was in college. They still did mums, and that was in the 90s. So it's not that far removed. And if you're in Texas, I think they still do the mums. Like there's a lot of schools I think that still do mums. They're ridiculously large and way bigger than they should be, but there's groups that still do it. So you got to figure out how to kind of bring that back. But yeah, that's where you kind of start realizing, all right, we are that far removed that now I'm making references to things that you have no idea what I'm talking about. So,
but you still enjoy.
But I do. I love kind of working with them, and that's what I always told them too. I was like, even though I'm not directly part of student programs anymore, I'm always here for questions. I would be happy to help in any way, just because I love to be around them and hear what kind of their ideas and really their passion. They have such a flair for life and drama, and it's just kind of to get a little glimpse of to be that carefree at times. Mm-hmm. You know, they think they're so stressed out and they're so like overburdened with everything. And I'm like, enjoy this. These 4 years are going to be the best time of your life. You think they're stressful now and you think they're just so much, but trust me, when you get out in the real world, you're going to miss those college days. You're going to miss that being able to wake up at 9 and go to a class for an hour and then have a couple hours off that you could either do studies or not, or, you know, like this whole idea of it. I'm like, yeah, you're going to miss that because you don't get that anymore. I always love when students go, so where are you going for spring break? And I'm like, working. I get to work for spring break. That's what we do during the summer and during fall and spring break. And in their minds, they think, well, students are gone, so you get off too, right? And that's how that works. And no real jobs don't have those as much. You kind of have to plan your time a little differently. So,
well, I mean, they do make us feel younger. They keep us young.
They do.
Let's put us that way.
They do. That is so true. I always tell people that. So.
All righty then. We'll say thank you.
Okay.
It's been great.
Well, hopefully it's everything that you were wanting. I don't know, but.
And go Pokes, right?
Yes, exactly. Go Pokes. Okay. So one thing that was a huge thing to us, I don't know if Dr. Bird knows it was as big as it was, but she reached out to us shortly after and tried to really make sure that we knew about therapists that were available, and encouraging our students and kind of helping us navigate how to help our students go through this process of grieving. And so she was a huge asset to us to try to get those connections early on, because she did understand the importance of these students grieving in some way and not just kind of trying to cope. And so she helped us make some connections for some of our executives to go and talk to somebody and facilitate that communication and therapeutically release some of their frustrations. And so that was a huge benefit to us. And I really do think, so the student that was directly involved, and even our executive director saw the benefit of that and really appreciated someone thinking in that way, you know, not just personally, but actually try to give us some resources and some tools to help manage that.
Do you think they followed through and went?
I know two of our executives did. I don't know if any of the others did. They may have and just never expressed anything. But I do know 2 of them did and really did have a benefit of talking about it in a different way.
Do you know if they talk to each other much about it?
They did a little bit. I think because it was such a surreal thing and such an emotional time, their emotions overwhelmed them if they did. So I feel like they talked some. And I think everybody was very concerned about the girl that actually planned parade, because I feel like she probably took it harder than the rest. Mm-hmm. So they were, I think, rallied around her, like that was like their way of coping was to care about her more. But yeah, so I think they talked a little bit about it, but I don't think they I don't know if they really got too deep with it.
Well, you should probably say who Dr. Bird is.
Oh, yeah. So Dr. Lee Bird at the time was Vice President of Student Affairs.
Okay.
She is no longer over there. She retired. But at the time, that's where she was.
And she personally came and...
She had reached out to us and talked to me and our president at the time about the resources that were available and really tried to encourage us to look into those and really offer those services for those students. And even, we could bring somebody over here if they would rather do it as a group. She just really kind of make sure that we knew what was available. Because if you've never been part of that kind of thing, you don't really think about how do you help people get through something like this. Like, what are the tools? And you just think about kind of what you would do, and that's kind of how you think. But I think because of the role that she's in, and her whole life has been around student affairs, unfortunately, I'm sure she's had to deal with a lot of tragedies and a lot of unfortunate situations, and so she's got experience in kind of helping students get through some of those, and so her expertise and her knowledge really helped us kind of move through the process a little bit differently. And like I said, everybody took it upon themselves of, we didn't force them to go, but just kind of let it out there of what they could do and encourage them if they were struggling and if, that they should go and talk to somebody. And so I really think that also helped the mourning and the grieving process a little bit for everybody to kind of manage it in their own way. But for the university to have these things available to them meant a lot. They didn't have to do it on their own.
How soon did she come and do that?
Oh, God.
I mean, the next week or
I think it was Monday.
really quick.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was pretty quick after it happened. I think she knew,
yeah, but you get to it really quick.
Yeah. These kids need to talk to somebody and deal with it in their own way. And so, yeah, I do think that she really thought about what we needed to kind of be doing, because she probably already knew, we probably don't know how to handle something like this, because when you're in alumni affairs, it's not something you think about as much because you're not dealing with that directly as much as a campus is. Unfortunately, in this day and age, campuses have to be more and more aware of tragedy and how to deal with those, and so I think that's kind of what helped is she kind of knew. So
yeah, she's great.
Yeah. She was a huge asset for us and great for this university. So
okay, anything else?
I think that's it.
Okay.